We can talk now to North East UKIP MEP Jonathan Arnott. Welcome to BBC Newcastle, Jonathan. So paying into the EU budget for another couple of years, a sensible idea, or is it not just defeating the whole object?
Well, I mean, mainly defeating the whole object, I would say. There is simply no legal obligation whatsoever for the UK to pay anything at all in post-Brexit. It's very clear within the treaties that on the date of withdrawal that the treaties cease to apply. So there's no legal obligation at all to pay another penny piece into the EU budget after we leave the European Union. So anything that is done, whether it's to do with this so-called divorce bill, whether it's to do with paying into the EU budget after we leave, anything along those lines would be an absolutely massive concession being made by the UK government. And what I think is happening here is that the UK is effectively being bullied into backing down, into agreeing to pay this money that we don't legally owe. Now, if you had a situation where both sides were negotiating in good faith, where you could see concessions coming on one side, then you can talk about making concessions on the other side. But
surely, though, Jonathan, she has to.
Concessions.
Surely she has to do something to break the deadlock in negotiations, and this would be a gesture of goodwill, albeit an expensive one. But in the long run, if it gets us a good trade deal, isn't that ultimately going to save us money?
Well, isn't the point here, though, that we're not going to get a better trade deal by effectively conceding everything that we can possibly concede up front before we start? And what it sounds like from what we've seen of what we've seen as the expectation from Theresa May's speech is that we're going to start off by giving an awful lot more than the EU could reasonably ask for or expect, but doing it all up front. So we're already conceding the EU's case effectively in security and intelligence. We're already conceding the EU's case in terms of paying into the EU budget after we leave. We're already conceding the EU's case on all of these areas. But actually, when you say in a negotiation, when you make concessions, you expect the other side to be making concessions as well. You don't do it as a precondition of kick-starting negotiations.
But it's a kind of case of brinkmanship, isn't it, really? Who's going to go first? And somebody has to go first. We're the ones that have decided to walk away. And so, I don't want to keep making the divorce analogy, but haven't you got to decide at the end of a long-term relationship who gets the CDs and, more importantly, the kids, and most importantly, the dog? You've got to decide, haven't you?
Of course, you've got to decide these things. And of course, I would love nothing more than for us to be able to have a good faith negotiation with the European Union. But you've got to understand how the European Union approaches these deals, how it approaches negotiating trade deals with third countries around the world. Because what it has a massive habit of doing is trying to insist on its own political position. So I see this constantly in the European Parliament, where the EU is effectively trying to politicise trade and bully countries into accepting what it is trying to achieve as a political priority. And we see this time and time again with EU proposed deals coming to the European Parliament. And then we see what the bigger economies in the world are able to do. And the UK, of course, is one of those.
Jonathan, we're going to have to leave it there. Jonathan Arnott, North East UKIP MEP on BBC Newcastle Radio for the North East.